And Len, if you don't recognize Len's name, you probably recognize his dad's name. Len, you grew up here at Tahoe, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And your dad is Gordon Shirts, who teaches at the high school?
That's right.
You graduated from South Tahoe High?
Yeah, I did in 1974.
Was your dad ever your teacher?
For driver training, but I avoided any other classes.
I would think that'd be smart. It might be very difficult to have your father trying to grade you.
I thought it would be strange, so I avoided it, yeah.
And now you're back at the Basin for this weekend. You now live in San Francisco, and you're involved in theater.
Yes.
To some people, that might seem like a very exciting life, to be an actor, to be a performer, and yet I would think it'd be very difficult in terms of finding steady employment, trying to be involved in commercial theater, but exploring non-commercial theater.
Well, I've been out of college for about 4 years, and this year is the first time I've actually been paid for a performance that I did. It was a dance piece, and did it this summer.
Is that typical? I mean, when we think of acting, I mean, you think of people like Barbra Streisand and these people that make these incredible sums of money. But is it typical that work is difficult to find for a performer and that you end up waiting tables or driving cabs?
I think it depends. If you're willing to do commercials and if you're willing to go down to L.A. or go to New York, I think it's a lot of hard work, but eventually you can make a decent living. It certainly isn't anything like Barbra Streisand.
Right. You mentioned, Len, both New York and Los Angeles, which, I mean, we're talking Broadway and we're talking motion pictures.
Right.
Why have you chosen to live in San Francisco?
I found in college that what I was most interested in was the experimental realm, or rather the non-traditional realm of mime, of clowning, of being able to do my own shows. And whereas Los Angeles has a lot of professional theater, it doesn't have much of an experimental theater. San Francisco has it's a hot spot for experimental theater.
Len, it's interesting, though, that you use the words experimental and traditional, and then talk about mime. I mean, mime, wasn't that what was used centuries ago in telling stories, in the Commedia dell'arte?
Yes. It was, it's a very old tradition. It's older than traditional theater, or theater. By traditional theater, I mean a playwright writes a play, and then he sends it to a producer produces it, director directs it, and actors act it, and they all do their own separate roles. With mime, or with Commedia dell'arte, the actor, the performer, is also part of the creation process and is also an integral part of the whole beginning of the theater piece. And in that sense, it's very close to experimental, because in experimental theater, everybody involved in the production is trying something new.
And the story evolves around the minds and the bodies then of the performers?
Of the performers. And so when you start a production, you usually have nothing except whoever, me and Frank. We get together and then we try things out, and what comes out is usually very much part of us and very much part of our skills.
Well, it's funny, Len, because I think for a lot of people, when you say experimental theater, they think, well, I'm not interested in that. Who wants to watch a bunch of hippies? Or they have a strange picture of it and don't realize maybe that it is more traditional, like you said, than traditional theater.
Well, experimental theater in the 60s was an attempt to get away from the strictures of, say, a script and reality, and also was very political in many ways. And you got a lot of people throwing tomatoes at the audience, well, not tomatoes, but doing things different and being experimental just for the sake of being experimental. And I see myself as actually being more traditional than traditional theater in a way, because I'm trying to find the basic roots of theater. And the important basic root of theater is connecting with the audience and having the audience enjoy the work and having fun.
And you find you can do that more than in experimental theater, work more with the audience?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that one of the reasons why you find yourself more liking, more interested in experimental theater rather than maybe doing Streetcar Named Desire?
Right.
Or...
I find a more personal connection because I am saying things that personally mean something very much to me, just from the fact of that it came out of myself from the very beginning. In a traditional acting role, which is also I'm sort of starving for it right now. I think the next thing I'm going to do is audition for a regular show. What you give to the audience is an interpretation of someone else's concept, and that's very important. You need that very much. What we've done in this show is I have written the show. I wrote a play, then I turned it over to Frank here, and then became the actor. And Frank took on the idea of interpreting it, and then I allowed myself to, or tried as best I could to forget that I had written the play and just act it.
Okay. We're going to talk more about Tricameron with Len Shirts and with his director, Frank Knowlton, when we return.
Summertime is fun time at Tahoe, and your fun starts at Dark Liquors. This week starts featuring Beck's Beer.
It's about 1:15 at Lake Tahoe's radio station, K Tahoe. Larry Friedman with you. With me, Len Shirts, who grew up here at South Lake Tahoe and is back this weekend. He lives now in the Bay Area, but is back to perform a show called Tricameron at the Lake Tahoe Community College. It must be exciting, Len, to come back to where you grew up and be performing.
Yeah, it is. It's been quite a while, several years. And I've been here off and on, but I haven't really worked here, and that's fun.
You mentioned, Len, that you first sat down and wrote the show, Tricameron. When you do that, what do you first do? Just grab a piece of paper and start jotting down notes, or...?
Well, the process was a bit different this time. The first thing I did for this show was I went into the studio, and I didn't have any idea. I just knew I wanted to do a solo show. This was about a year and a half ago. And I just started fooling around. I got some music, and I ended up starting dancing, doing little dances to the music, and the dances started becoming little stories, and then I started connecting the stories. Then they brought Frank in, and he watched, and we developed a first act. Then I took about 6 months of just thinking. I traveled sometimes, and I traveled a while in Europe, walking through the forest and things, and just thinking. And after about 6 months, I was ready to write the second half.
And then did you again call on Frank to...
Yeah. Wrote the second half, then I had to go back and rewrite the first half, and then about, January, February? Maybe it was March. We got together and started working once the script was complete.
Frank, how did you and Len get to know each other to put this show together?
Well, we both were relatively active in the Berkeley theater scene, doing various things, and had similar teachers and knew different people. Worked a little bit together and liked the kinds of things we did.
Is it difficult to take Len's or anyone's first ideas and then put them into action and to maybe rework things that you as the director don't think will play on the stage?
Yeah, it is difficult. There's no getting around it. It is difficult. Everybody has something invested in what they do, and it's very difficult to see it from the outside. And then when I get started and I get something invested in it, and working those things out it's been a very valuable process for me to be involved in.
I would think it would be very difficult, especially with a show like this, to have more than one person involved, just because it sounds like a very personal piece.
Well, that is true, but it's also true that I know Len's skills well, and that it's not just calling on somebody come in here. It's you have to find somebody that you have some confidence in and trust with your work.
We've had we've had struggles, but the more we see each other's vision, or the more we see the way we each see the work, it gets easier and easier. And it's been very learning.
When you say skills, we've mentioned mime, and you are an actor. What other skills will you be using in the piece?
Well, there's a bit of juggling. It's not traditional juggling. I use some props, like a staff and a sword and several other objects, and I manipulate them.
Do you also manipulate the audience?
Not directly, no.
Because there's an interesting, in one of the pieces of information that I got from the college, it said something to the effect of incorporating the audience. Or here is it's a play in which the audience's imagination plays an enormous role. And I think that sounds fascinating.
It's very much, well, it's an epic in a way. It's an epic told by one person, one body. And for everyone, the audience, to see the story, they're going to have to see cliffs, worlds, gates, forces, monsters, all of these things, and different characters. And that's a lot of imagination. Hopefully it will be a fun thing for them to do.
I would think it'd be a lot of fun, especially since we're so used to movies and TV where everything is just thrown at you and you just sit back and turn the old imagination gears off, that it would be a fun new experience for people.
Yeah, this is a very specific area where this show connects with ancient traditions, where people would be sitting around campfires, and part of the process of storytelling was part of the communal experience that everybody shared. They identified, that's how they told the stories of their being, and connected with something that was beyond cooking dinner, and made a community of it. And that's the audience's commitment to the show is a very valuable part of this, as it was in ancient forms.
Frank, you mentioned the storytelling. Is that how you picture the production, that Len is basically there telling us the story and giving us his movements and his directions, and yet the people are able to, like when reading a book, picture the locations and picture the other things in their minds?
Well, hopefully an audience can release themselves to this process and allow the process to develop, and it happens as much as happening on the stage outside of them. It happens inside them, as they do release themselves to that process.
Do you think that will be difficult for the audiences? I mean, we are a television-geared society. Do you think it will be hard for audiences to sit back and let their imagination go with you?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so at all. I think it's a very easy process, and it should be very much fun.
A lot of what I'm doing is basic childhood, what you do when you're a child and you play. And if people can't remember that, they're in big trouble.
Len, when people leave on either Saturday or Friday night of this weekend, when they leave the theater, how would you like them to leave? Thinking what?
I would like them to be thinking lots of things. I would like their minds not to be stopped. I mean, they just continually run on, and to be thinking about beauty, ugliness. I think those are some of the part of the show that's important.
But as far as the feeling uplifted?
Feeling very uplifted.
Yeah.
That's really the key. I'm not interested in the slightest in doing shows that are depressing or doing shows that are pessimistic. That's not something we need these days. What we need these days is optimism and some way of looking at this world and saying, hey, it's not bad.
We have to go to CBS at 25 minutes after the hour, but before we do, what would you say, Len, to the listener who's thinking, I don't want to go see something experimental, even though we've talked about the term experimental, but for that person who's thinking, what would your response to them be?
Come anyway. It might be interesting. It probably will be.
Frank?
It's not threatening. It's something to be enjoyed, and it should be fun.
No one's going to leap out at anybody.
No, we don't throw chocolates. We don't.
No chocolates, no grape nuts, nothing like that.
Well, I guess Jeff Wentworth over at the college has gotten some comments, and last night was saying very reassuringly, no one's going to jump out at you.
In some ways, there's bits of clown in this. There's bits of elements of dance, elements. It's a very enjoyable visual piece.
Neither Len or I are angry at the audience. We consider them part of the process and very valuable.
That's a great way to put it, really. Why would you be angry at the audience?
So I think the people that come will have a very good time. And,
I think it'll be, I'm glad that you're here, because it's certainly an unusual offering for the Tahoe Basin to be able to take a part in and go and be with. When exactly, Len, are you performing it?
8:30 on Friday and Saturday of this week.
And that's in the Collegiate Theater, which is at 970 Lodi Avenue. That is the new campus here at the South Lake Tahoe. If you're going down Highway 50, you turn onto Lodi Avenue. You can't miss it. As Len said, both performances on Friday and Saturday will be at 8:30. It is suggested that you get your tickets in advance, since there are only about 54 seats in the theater. So the tickets are $5 each. They may be purchased at the college's community education office. That's at the main college, the old motel there on Highway 50. If you'd like more information, you can call 541-4660. That's 541-4660, and just tell them you would like your tickets to Tricameron. We have about 30 seconds left. Can you, in that amount of time, tell us why you chose the name Tricameron?
Man with 3 rooms in his head.
Oh, that's simple enough. And if you would like to know what that means, my thanks to both of you for coming in this afternoon and trying to explain to us what exactly is taking place this afternoon. I'm sure that by hearing it, everybody else will be excited and not at all feel threatened by the term experimental.
Yeah.
So my thanks, Len, and my thanks to you,
thank you.
Frank.
Thank you.
That'll be this Friday and Saturday night at the college. The number again to call for your tickets, 541-4660. Here's CBS.
A headache?